This study material is to be used in order to assist with preparation for the FAA Airframe oral exam as it pertains to the Aircraft Maintenance Technician certification, also known as an A&P mechanic. The questions used as study material are those by A&P FASTRACK, located in Bethany, Oklahoma. I will read the question, pause for approximately 3 to 5 seconds, then read the answer. Let's begin. What forms of wood, other than solid wood, are used in aircraft? Laminated and plywood. What is a laminated wood assembly? 2 or more layers glued together with the grain of all layers approximately parallel. How is aircraft plywood constructed? It is usually made of an odd number of thin plies with the grain of each layer at an angle of 45 or 90 degrees to the adjacent ply or plies. What species of wood is used as a standard for strength properties? Spruce. How would you inspect wood for rot? Inspect for a dark discoloration of the wood surface or gray stains along the grain. What types of glues are used in aircraft wood structure repair? Casein and resin glues. What effects do room temperature have on gluing wood structures using resin glue? Curing time as well as joint strength. When are mineral streaks acceptable? If inspection fails to reveal any decay. Are hard knots acceptable? Yes, within specified limitations. Why is compressed wood not acceptable? It is very detrimental to strength. Why is it necessary to examine all stains and discoloration carefully? To determine whether or not they are harmless or preliminary or advanced decay. Why are light steel bushings sometimes used in wooden structures? To prevent crushing the wood when the bolts are tightened. What are the results of insufficient gluing pressure? Thick glue lines and a weak joint. What methods are used to apply pressure to wood glue joints? Brads, nails, screws, clamps, and power presses. What type of joint is generally used in splicing structural members? A scarf joint. Why does the strength of a beveled scarf joint depend on the accuracy of the beveled cut? The effective glue area will be reduced if both beveled cuts are not the same. Always splice and reinforce plywood webs with what type of wood? The same type of plywood as the original. What method will prevent a batch and a plywood pressure plate from adhering together due to extruding glue from the patch? The use of waxed paper between the patch and pressure plate. What areas of a wood spar may not be spliced? Under a wing attachment, landing gear, engine mount, and lift strut fittings. What is the maximum number of splices that should be made to any one spar? 2. Why are bushings made of plastic or light metal used on wooden structures? To provide additional bearing surface. What is the minimum temperature for curing wood joints with resin glue? 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Aircraft coverings. What are 2 types of fabric used for covering aircraft? Organic and synthetic. What are the organic fibers used for covering aircraft? Cotton and linen. What are the synthetic fibers used for covering aircraft? Fiberglass and heat shrinkable synthetic fibers, such as nylon, Orlon, and Dacron. What determines the quality and strength requirements for fabric-covered aircraft? The original manufacture by the never exceeded speed and wing loading. What strength of fabric should be used for recovering an aircraft? High-grade aircraft textile materials, at least as good a quality and equivalent strength as those originally used by the aircraft manufacturer. What is the fabric warp? The direction along the length of fabric. What is the purpose of reinforcing tape? It is used over ribs between the fabric and the rib stitching to prevent the stitching cord from cutting through the fabric. What types of machine-sewed seams are used? French fell, folded fell, and plain overlap. What should be done to a structure that will be covered with doped fabric? Dope-proof it with a protective coating of paint or tape. Where is surface tape used? Along sewed seams, lapped edges, rib stitching, and screws. What is the advantage of the envelope method of covering wings? Practically all sewing is done by machine. When are anti-tear strips recommended? When the never exceeded speed is in excess of 250 miles per hour. How are ventilation and drainage hole edges reinforced? With plastic, aluminum, or brass grommets. What methods are used to check the condition of doped fabric? A punch tester, or when results are marginal, a laboratory test is needed. What is the maximum permissible deterioration for used aircraft fabric? 30% of the original fabric strength. What type of fabric is not affected by moisture and mildew? Fiberglass. What is a fabric selvage edge? An edge of cloth woven to prevent raveling. What rib lace spacing is used when the original spacing is unknown? Use the chart in AC 43.13-1B. What is a tie-off knot? A standard modified seam knot used on all stitches other than the starting stitch. In which direction is the warp and selvage edge of aircraft fabric applied, and what identification is usually found on the selvage edge? Parallel to line of flight, and the TSO number is recorded on the selvage edge. Aircraft finishes. What are the common types of paint used on aircraft? Primers, enamels, lacquers, and epoxies. What is used with zinc chromate primer if it is too thick and needs to be thinned? Toluene. What are two types of dope used for aircraft finishes? Nitrate and butyrate. Why should dope not be used over paint or enamel? Because eventually it will remove the material. What happens to paint finishes if excess dryer is added to the paint? The results will be a brittle film causing cracking and peeling. What is the purpose of zinc chromate primer? It serves as a corrosion-resistant covering and base coat for protective top coats. What is the advantage of using butyrate dope instead of nitrate dope from a safety point of view? It's less flammable. Many of the solvents and thinners used in modern finishing systems are toxic. What health safety precautions should the mechanic observe? Some form of respirator or mask must be worn when spraying. What are three methods of applying paint? Dipping, brushing, and spraying. What paint system is compatible with epoxy top coats? Any paint system in good condition. What is the cause for spray painting dust? Incorrect air pressure or the distance of the gun from the work. What may cause spray paint sags and runs? Too much paint being applied or inadequate surface preparation. What causes orange peel? Spray model. Incorrect paint viscosity, air pressure, gun setting, or distance of the gun from the work. What is a blushing paint finish? Clouding or blooming of the film. What will cause a blushing paint finish? Moisture in the air supply, adverse humidity, changes in temperature. What could be the result of applying a coat of dope when the temperature of the dope room is too high? Pinholes in the dope film. What areas must be protected from damage when using paint remover stripper? Synthetic rubber products, composites, fabric, acrylics, and bonded surfaces must be protected. What is the reason for paint touch-up other than appearance? It eliminates general corrosion problems. How can a mechanic determine if the control surfaces need to be checked for balance after painting? Refer to the manufacturer's service manual and/or contact the manufacturer. Sheet metal structures. What is done with the rivet head stem when a self-plugging friction lock rivet is installed? It is pulled until it snaps off and then trimmed flush with the head. Give an example of a self-plugging mechanical lock rivet. Cherry lock, Cherry Max, or Huck. What tools are required to install cherry lock rivets? A hand or power-operated tool equipped with mechanical pulling head. Describe the correct dimensions on a properly formed rivet head. 1.5 diameter wide, half the diameter tall. What is bonded honeycomb construction? It is a laminar constructed combination of alternating dissimilar materials, two metal facings bonded on each side of a core. What materials are used in special applications of bonded honeycomb construction? Stainless steel, titanium, magnesium, plywood, glass, nylon, and cotton cloth. What may cause delamination of honeycomb construction? Sonic vibration, liquid leakage, internal condensation, and manufacturer's mistake. What is a potting compound repair used for in bonded honeycomb? Hole fillings. What is done with the damaged area in bonded honeycomb? The damaged area must be removed. What will cause crazing in transparent plastic panels and windshields? Stress, improper handling, and harmful solvents. What procedure should be used when drilling plexiglass to prevent damage to the hole as the drill point breaks through the underside? Back up the plexiglass with wood and feed the drill slowly. What should be done to twist drills that are to be used for drilling completely through plexiglass? They should be modified to a 60-degree tip angle, the cutting edge to a 0 rake angle, and the back lip clearance angle increased to 12 to 15 degrees. What calculation must be made when bending sheet metal? Bend allowance and setback. What must be done when two bends intersect? Relief holes are drilled at the intersection. What type of weathering damage may be found on aluminum aircraft? Corrosion. What methods are used in forming sheet metal? Shrinking, stretching, crimping, and folding. What factors are used to determine setback? The radius of the bend and the thickness of the material. What is the purpose of lightning holes cut in rib sections? To reduce weight. What is a joggle? It is an offset formed on an angle strip to allow clearance for a sheet or extrusion. How do you determine the total length of a solid rivet for installation? Grip length plus 1.5 times the shank diameter. How do you determine the proper material to be used for repair of an all-metal aircraft? Use the same type and thickness of the material that was used in the original structure. What is the single row spacing and edge distance for protruding head rivets? Edge distance is 2 times the diameter, spacing is 3 times the diameter. Describe rivet head marking for A, B, D, AD, and DD rivets. A is plain, 1100. B is cross, 5056. D is tit, 2017. AD is dimple, 2117. And DD rivets are a double dash, 2024. What determines the use of dimpling instead of drilled countersinking for flush rivets? The thickness of the sheet. What is the most common type of rivet failure? Shear. Describe the criteria for replacement of a 2024 rivet with a 2117 rivet for general repairs. For 5/32 or less diameter, use the next larger rivet size, 2117, assuming that spacing and edge distance meet minimum requirements. Welding. What is the preferred method of welding magnesium? Gas-shielded arc welding. What is a safety hazard associated with welding magnesium? If it ignites, it is extremely hard to extinguish. What must be done in the weld zone to successfully weld titanium? The weld zone must be shielded with an inert gas. Why is it necessary to use flux in all silver soldering? To have the base metal chemically clean without the slightest film of oxide. What type of flame is used for silver soldering? A neutral flame. What type of repair could be made for a dented steel tube cluster joint? Weld a formed steel patch plate over the dented area. What method can be used to insert a tight-fitting inner sleeve into a tubular repair? Cool the inner sleeve with dry ice or in cold water. What are 3 general types of welding? Gas, electric arc, and electric resistance. How is a soft flame obtained without reducing thermal output? By using a larger tip and adjusting the pressures. What is the most extensively used method of welding aluminum? Gas-shielded arc welding. What valve should be turned off first when extinguishing a torch? The acetylene, to allow gas in the tip to burn out. What procedure will control expansion when welding a joint? Tack welding at intervals along the joint. What safety precautions should be taken when gas welding has been completed? Turn off the valves and relieve all pressure. What must be done with heat-treated aluminum alloys after a welding repair has been made? They must be reheat treated. What is the result of insufficient penetration? A low-strength weld. What type of welding causes less buckling and warping than gas welding? Metallic arc welding. What is gas-shielded arc welding? A gas is used as a shield around the arc to prevent the atmosphere from contaminating the weld. What are some advantages of gas-shielded arc welding? The weld is stronger, more ductile, and more corrosion resistant. What does the size of the torch tip opening determine? The amount of heat, not the temperature. Assembly and rigging. What is a servo trim tab? It is an auxiliary control positioned by movement of controls and aids in moving a control surface. What is a balance trim tab? It is an auxiliary control positioned by fixed linkage in the opposite direction of a control surface to aid in control surface movement. What is a spring tab? It is an auxiliary control that aids in moving the primary control surface by keeping a direct proportion of deflection to the aerodynamic load imposed on the surface. Name 4 high lift devices. Leading edge flaps, slots, slats, and trailing edge flaps. What are 3 mechanical methods used to actuate flight control systems? Cable, push-pull, and torque tube. What is the purpose of a rotorcraft cyclic pitch control? It changes the pitch of each main rotor blade during a cycle of rotation. What is the purpose of the rotorcraft collective pitch control? It varies the lift of the main rotor blades simultaneously. What unit compensates for helicopter main rotor torque? An auxiliary or tail rotor. What controls a helicopter tail rotor? Foot pedals. What flight control surfaces are considered the primary group? Ailerons, elevators, and rudder. What flight controls are included in the auxiliary group? Trim tabs and spring tabs. What is considered the secondary flight controls group? Wing flaps, spoilers, speed brakes, leading edge flaps, and slots. What are the 3 axes of an aircraft? Vertical, longitudinal, and lateral. Where does breakage of control cables occur most frequently? Where cables pass over pulleys and through fairleads. What items must be known before using a typical cable rigging chart? The size of the cable and ambient air temperature. What are cable tension regulators? They are mechanical devices that automatically maintain cable tension. What is a cable fairlead? A cable guide. What is the purpose of vortex generators? To provide for boundary layer air control. Why are control surfaces locked when an aircraft is parked? To prevent wind damage to controls. What tools are primarily used to check control surface travel? Protractors, rigging fixtures, contour templates, and rulers. Airframe inspection. In accordance with 14 CFR 6585 and 6587, what type of inspection may a certificated airframe and power plant mechanic sign off? A 100-hour inspection. When may a mechanic perform an annual inspection? When the mechanic holds an inspection authorization. When must an annual inspection be performed? If required for a particular aircraft. Within the preceding 12 calendar months. What may be used as a checklist for 100-hour inspections? Any checklist which meets the minimum standards of Part 43, Appendix D. Where is the list of information that is required for aircraft records after completion of 100-hour inspections? Part 43. Who may supervise a progressive inspection? Certificated A&P mechanics holding an inspection authorization, certificated airframe repair stations, or the aircraft manufacturer. When is a 100-hour inspection required on an aircraft operating under Part 91, General Operating and Flight Rules? When an aircraft is used for carrying persons for hire, and no person may give flight instruction for hire which that person provides. When is the first 100-hour inspection due after discontinuance of a progressive inspection program? 100 hours after the last complete inspection of the progressive program. Does an aircraft under a progressive inspection program need a 100-hour inspection if it is used for flight instruction for hire? No. How can an aircraft that is due an annual inspection be flown to a base for inspection? If a special flight permit has been issued for the aircraft. What kind of certificate must an individual, not a repair station, have to conduct a complete 100-hour inspection on an aircraft and approve it for return to service? A mechanic certificate with airframe and power plant ratings. Where would you find the operating conditions that make a 100-hour inspection mandatory? 14 CFR Part 91. Where would you find the recommended statement for recording the approval or disapproval for a return to service of an aircraft after a 100-hour or annual inspection? 14 CFR Part 43. Where should you obtain the necessary information to work on electrical equipment? From the manufacturer's maintenance manual or instructions for continued airworthiness. Who must approve for return to service radio equipment installations made in accordance with supplemental type certificate data? The holder of an inspection authorization. Can an aircraft that is required by Section 91.409 to have a 100-hour inspection be flown beyond the inspection requirement? Yes, if necessary, to reach a place at which the inspection can be accomplished, but not to exceed 10 flight hours. How do you determine when the next 100-hour inspection is due if the owner, en route to your maintenance facility, exceeded the 100-hour inspection time by 2 hours? These 2 hours must be included in computing the next 100 hours of time in service. If the owner or operator of an aircraft desires to use a progressive inspection program, who must they submit a written request to? The FAA Flight Standards District Office, having jurisdiction over the area in which the applicant is located. Is an engine run-up on turbine-powered aircraft required as part of the 100-hour inspection? Yes. Landing gear systems. What is used to inflate a landing gear shock strut? Dry air or nitrogen? What regular inspection should be made of the exposed portion of a landing gear strut? Clean and inspect for damage and proper extension. What is the purpose of main landing gear torque links? They keep the landing gear pointed in a straight ahead direction. What power sources are normally used to retract landing gear systems? Hydraulic or electrical? What type of nose wheel steering is provided on small aircraft? A simple system consisting of mechanical linkage hooked to the rudder pedals. What unit prevents nose wheel vibration? A shimmy damper. What are some types of brake systems? Independent, power boost, and power control. What is the purpose of power brake debooster cylinders? They reduce the pressure to the brakes and increase the volume of fluid flow. What must be accomplished before inspecting a wheel brake system for hydraulic leaks? Pressurize the system. What prevents a split wheel from leaking air through the inner and outer mating surfaces, or the wheel assembly? A rubber packing between the two assemblies. What is the most necessary maintenance function for safe, long aircraft tire service? Proper inflation. What are the effects of underinflation on tires? Rapid or uneven wear near the edge of tread, and creep or slip when the brakes are applied. When should a landing gear retraction check be accomplished? During an annual inspection or other inspections, when landing gear components have been replaced, and after hard landings. What is the indication of excessive heating of a wheel bearing? Discoloration. What is the purpose of an anti-skid system? To bring a fast-moving aircraft to a stop during ground roll without tire skidding. What is the purpose of a wheel fusible plug? To relieve air pressure to prevent tire blowout. What are some methods of bleeding brakes? Gravity and pressure methods. What methods are used for transmitting cockpit control movements to a steering control unit in large aircraft? Mechanical, electrical, and hydraulic. What prevents a nose landing gear from being retracted with the nose wheel out of the center position? Nose wheel centering internal cams or external track. Hydraulic and pneumatic power systems. What are three principal categories of hydraulic fluids? Minerals, polyalpha olefins, and phosphate ester base fluids. What color is mineral base hydraulic fluid? Red. What happens to plastic resins, vinyl compositions, lacquers, and oil-based paints if exposed to a phosphate ester base hydraulic fluid such as Skydraw? The material will be damaged, softened, and/or peel. What feature is built into a hydraulic pump drive system to prevent engine damage in the event of pump seizure or overload? A shear section in the pump drive shaft. What precautions should be taken to minimize contamination during replacement of a hydraulic unit? All lines should be plugged or capped after disconnecting. What would cause a hydraulic filter to go into open bypass, allowing unfiltered fluid into the system? A clogged filter. What are the sources of hydraulic pressure in aircraft? Hand pumps, engine-driven pumps, and electrically driven pumps. What are methods of pressurizing a hydraulic reservoir? Cabin pressurization, turbine compressor, aspirator, and Venturi T. How does a gear-type pump operate? Two mesh gears revolve in a housing and are driven by a power unit. Fluid is trapped and pressurized as the gears turn. What are two types of engine-driven hydraulic pumps? Constant delivery and variable delivery. What is the purpose of a pressure relief valve? To limit the amount of pressure, thereby preventing failure of the system components. What is the purpose of a pressure regulator? To manage the output of the pump to maintain system pressure and allow the pump to turn without resistance. What is used in some hydraulic systems to supplement the power pump when several units are operated at the same time? An accumulator. What are the different types of accumulators? Diaphragm, bladder, and piston. For what purposes are pneumatic systems used in some aircraft? To operate brakes, doors, drive pumps, and engine starting. What are sources of pneumatic power? Storage bottles, vane-type pumps, and turbine engine compressors. What happens to excessive pressure in a pneumatic system? A relief valve will bleed it to the atmosphere. What is the purpose of restrictors that are used in aircraft pneumatic systems? To control the rate of airflow. Why should a pneumatic system be purged periodically? To remove contamination and moisture. What must be accomplished with any accumulator prior to disassembling? Make sure the air or preload has been discharged. Cabin atmosphere control systems. What are the two groups of independent cabin compressors? Positive displacement and centrifugal. What is the principal control of a pressurization system? An outflow valve. What method is used by some turbine-powered aircraft for pressurization? Bleed air from the turbine engine compressor. What is a Roots blower? An engine-driven compressor. What pressurization control unit will change the position of an outflow valve? The cabin pressure controller. On reciprocating engine aircraft, what are some methods of supplying heat to the cabin? Gasoline combustion heater, electric heater, and exhaust gas air-to-air heat exchanger. What is the function of ventilating air in a combustion heater? To carry the heat to the places where it is needed. What are sources of ventilating air in a combustion heater? A blower, ram air, or cabin compressor. What components are used in an air cycle cooling system? An expansion turbine, air-to-air heat exchanger, and various valves. What causes a temperature drop in an air cycle cooling system? The compressed air performs the work of turning a turbine, and it undergoes a pressure and temperature drop. How does a water separator remove moisture from the air? The moist air passes through vanes that swirl the air, and the droplets are collected and drained. What is vapor cycle cooling? Freon cooling. What components are in a vapor cycle cooling system? An evaporator, compressor, condenser, and expansion valve. How does a continuous flow oxygen system operate? Oxygen flows from a charged cylinder through a high pressure line to a reducing valve and to mask outlets. How does a basic pressure demand oxygen system operate? Oxygen flows from a charged cylinder to a pressure demand regulator, adjustable by each crew member. What must be accomplished if an oxygen system has been open to atmosphere for 2 hours or more? The system must be purged to remove moisture. What is used to purge oxygen lines of moisture? Dry nitrogen, dry air, or oxygen. What type of oxygen must be used in aircraft? Aviators breathing oxygen. Why is oil added to a vapor cycle freon system? To provide lubrication and prevent compressor failure. What safety precautions should be observed when servicing oxygen systems? Use only oil-free tools, clothing, hands, and adequate eye protection. No smoking or open flames. Instrument systems. What is used as a reference for range marking instruments? Aircraft specification or type certificate data sheets and flight manuals. What does a yellow arc on an instrument dial indicate? Caution. Who can apply range markings to the instrument dial face? A certificated instrument repair station. Why are slippage marks used on instrument glass covers? To indicate loose glass. When range markings are placed on an instrument glass, what precaution must be taken? The glass must be marked for slippage indication. What can be used to static check a manifold pressure indicator? Current atmospheric pressure. What aircraft instrument may be used to check a manifold pressure indicator for correct indication? A sensitive altimeter. What indication errors may be found in altimeters? Scale, hysteresis, and installation. What flight instruments are usually connected to a pedostatic system? Rate of climb, airspeed, and altimeter. Why is it undesirable to clear obstructions from pedostatic holes with a tool? The holes are aerodynamically critical. What is required after replacement of components connected to a pedostatic system? A leak test. What methods are used to drive turn and bank indicators? Vacuum, air pressure, or electricity? What causes an electric-driven gyro rotor to tilt when the aircraft is turned? Gyroscopic precession. What is a synchro-type remote indicating system? A system that transmits information from one point to another point. Flap position. What does a capacitor-type fuel quantity system accurately determine? The weight of the fuel in the tanks. What does a tachometer indicate? Crankshaft or main turbine rotor speed. Where does an electrical resistance temperature indicator receive a signal? From a temperature-sensitive element or bulb. What type of indicating system is a turbine engine exhaust gas temperature system? A thermocouple type system. What is the meaning of swinging a compass? Correcting for deviations by adjusting the compensating magnets. Name at least 2 items that should be looked for during an inspection of a magnetic compass. Security of attachment, correct readings at various headings, the bowl should be filled with liquid and not contain any bubbles or discoloration, and the scale should be readable. What effect do magnetic fields generated by operating electrical equipment and metal components have on a magnetic compass? They deflect the compass needle from alignment with magnetic north. Communication and navigation systems. What are 3 basic autopilot components? Gyros, servos, and an amplifier. What are the sensing elements of an autopilot system? A directional gyro, turn and bank gyro, attitude gyro, and altitude control. What are the actuating elements of an autopilot system? Servos that operate the control surfaces. What are the basic components of a communication system? A microphone, transmitter, transmitting antenna, receiving antenna, receiver, and headset or loudspeaker. What is the most common communication system in use? Very high frequency, VHF system. How often does the ATC transponder require certification? Every 24 calendar months. What are the components of a typical airborne VOR system? A receiver, visual indicator, frequency selector, antennas, and power supply. Why are two antennas or a single multi-element antenna usually required for an ILS system? One for the localizer and one for the glide slope receivers. What information does a glide slope radio beam provide? Vertical guidance for correct angle of descents. What is a DME? Distance measuring equipment. What is VOR equipment used for? Navigation. Where should DME antennas be located? On the lower surface of the aircraft in a position that will not be blanked out by the wings in a bank. What is an ADF? An automatic direction finder. What type antennas do most transponders have? A short stub usually mounted on the lower surface of the fuselage. What powers an emergency locator transmitter? ELT. A self-contained battery. What is one method used to monitor the output signal during an ELT test? A VHF communications receiver tuned to 121.5 MHz. How may the determination be made to replace or recharge the batteries in an ELT even though the set operates? The expiration date for replacing or for recharging is marked on the outside of the transmitter and entered in the aircraft maintenance record. What is the purpose of a radio shock mount bonding jumper? To provide a low impedance ground return. What time of day should you perform the maintenance tests of an installed ELT? The test should be conducted during the first 5 minutes after the hour, and at any other time they should be coordinated with the nearest FAA control tower or flight service station. Fuel systems. What is the purpose of a fuel dump system? To reduce the weight of the aircraft to a specified landing weight. When would a fuel jettison system be required for small aircraft? It is required when the maximum takeoff weight exceeds the maximum landing weight. What are two types of fuel cells? A bladder type fuel cell and an integral fuel cell. What supports the weight of fuel in a bladder type fuel cell? The structure of the cavity that the cell fits into. What is wet wing type construction? Integral fuel cells. What is the purpose of a fuel temperature indicator in a turbine-powered aircraft? To determine when there may be danger of ice crystals forming in the fuel. What is the purpose of a fuel cross-feed system? To provide an interconnected fuel system so that the fuel can be fed from various tanks to any engine. What positions may be selected on a fuel tank selector valve? The fuel tank selector valve positions are crossfeed, transfer, and on or off. What are drip gauges and sight gauges? They are underwing bayonet type fuel gauges. What is an electrically operated fuel tank shutoff valve in transit light? A light that indicates when the valve is in motion. What is a pressure fueling system sometimes referred to? An underwing or single point pressure fueling. What are some advantages of single point pressure fueling? It reduces fueling time, eliminates aircraft skin damage, and reduces chances of contamination. What method may be used to check a fuel tank for leaks after a patch or weld has been performed? The tank is pressurized with up to half psi air pressure, and liquid soap is added to detect any leaks. What should be done with old gaskets and seals when replacing fuel system components? They should be removed and replaced with new ones. What type of fuel system leak will not be visible by evidence of stains or wet spots? An internal component fuel leak, shut-off valve, selector valve, or cross-feed valve. What are 4 types of fuel quantity gauges in use today? Sight glass, mechanical, electrical, and electronic. Why is an electronic type fuel quantity gauge more accurate than others? It measures by weight instead of gallons. What is the purpose of fuel tank internal baffles? To resist fuel surging caused by changes in the attitude of the aircraft. Why should you wait a period after fueling before checking fuel sumps? To allow time for water and sediment to settle to the drain point. Electrical systems. What may be used to determine the size of an unmarked wire? A wire gauge. Why should an electrical system be checked before a load increase? To determine that the wire, cable, or protection device limit will not be exceeded. What type of electrical items may cause short-term demand loads on an electrical system? Landing gear motors, radio transmitters, and flap motors. What instruments are used to monitor electrical loads? Ammeters and voltmeters. What type of circuit breaker should not be used in aircraft? Automatic reset type circuit breakers. When should a switch be derated from its nominal rating? When used with high rush-in circuits, inductive circuits, and direct current motors. Where is the white position navigation light mounted? On the tail, visible from the rear. What color is a left wingtip position light? Red. What factors are considered when selecting wire size for electrical power? Allowable power loss, permissible voltage drop, and current carrying ability. When do electric motors draw several times their rated current? When starting. How long should bonding jumper wires be? As short as practicable. What hardware is used to make bonding or grounding connections to a structure of dissimilar material? A washer of suitable material should be used so that the corrosion will occur on the washer. What should be done to a conduit end when fittings are not used? It should be flared to prevent wire insulation damage. What size electrical conduit should be used? 25% larger than the maximum diameter of the wire bundle. During troubleshooting, when is a continuity check made? When the power is off. What 3 faults are associated with electrical system malfunctions? Open circuits, shorted circuits, and low power. When is a circuit breaker designed to open? Before the conductor emits smoke. What causes an AC electric motor to run slow? No lubrication, applied voltage is low, or defective wiring. What could cause an AC electric motor to run fast? excessive supply power, or motor field windings shorted. What controls the output voltage of an alternator? The voltage output of the DC exciter. How many terminal lugs can be put on a single terminal strip in an aircraft? 4. How can a wire and a bundle be identified? By the identification code on the wire. Where is a circuit breaker located in a circuit? As close to the power source as possible. Position and warning systems. What types of landing gear warnings are provided for retractable landing gear systems? A horn or some other aural device and a red warning light. When does an aural device operate in a landing gear warning system? When the throttle is retarded and the landing gear is not down and locked. What types of position indicators indicate that the landing gear is down and locked? Green lights and/or visual indicators. What is the purpose of a Mach warning system? It provides an aural warning that aircraft speed limits may have been exceeded. How does a takeoff aural warning differ from a landing gear aural warning? The aural horn for takeoff is intermittent and continuous for landing. Name at least 2 items that may cause a takeoff warning horn to operate in a typical transport jet aircraft. Speed brakes, flaps, stabilizer, and auxiliary power exhaust door not in their takeoff position. What does an anti-skid warning indicate? System failure, or the system is turned off. What is the indication of an anti-skid system automatically returning to a manual brake system? A warning light. When is the time to check landing gear switches, lights, and warning horns or buzzers for proper operation? During a gear retraction check. What retractable landing gear positions must be indicated? Secured in the up position and secured in the down position. Where are the procedures located for checking and adjusting landing gear switches? The aircraft manufacturer's manual. What other aircraft system may activate the landing gear warning system? The wing flaps system. What type of indication is used for cabin doors in the open and closed positions? Warning lights. What is the reason for a master caution warning system in aircraft? To alert of system operation or malfunction. What system is used to indicate battery over temperature? A warning light. What is the purpose of the annunciator system? To show, by a warning light, the meaning of the condition they announce. What is the source of the anti-skid warning system signal? The skid control generator. What condition will cause a wing leading edge anti-ice overheat light to illuminate? Failure of a thermal switch to cause closure of the anti-ice shutoff valve. Ice and rain control systems. What are 2 methods of inflating pneumatic de-icer boots? An engine-driven vacuum pump and bleed air from a turbine engine compressor. How are de-icer boots attached to the leading edges of wing and tail surfaces? Cement, fairing strips and screws, or a combination of both. What is the function of the oil separator used in some de-icer boot systems? In a wet type air pump, it is used to remove approximately 75% of the oil from the air. What must be accomplished to a de-icer boot prior to a cold patch repair? Relieve the installed tension. What normally keeps de-icer boots held down in flight? Suction is supplied to the boots during flight. What methods are used to supply heat for thermal anti-icing systems? Turbine compressor hot air, engine exhaust heat exchangers, and ram air heated by a combustion heater. How is the temperature maintained in a thermal anti-icing system? By mixing heated air with cold air. What prevents overheating of the wing leading edge skin in a thermal anti-ice system that is operated by engine bleed air? A temperature sensor will cause a valve to close and shut off the flow of hot air. What happens to the thermal anti-icing airflow after it has heated a leading edge surface? The airflow is exhausted to the atmosphere. Why are anti-icing systems using turbine engine bleed air provided with an overheat system? To protect the aircraft structure from damage due to excessive heat. What are several problems associated with electrically heated windshields? Delamination, scratches, arcing, and discoloration. When is windshield delamination acceptable? When it is within the limits established by manufacturer and is not in an area where it affects the optical qualities of the windshield panel. What are the effects of electric windshield arcing? Local overheating and damage to the panel. How can an electrically heated pitot tube with an ammeter installed in the system be checked for operation? It can be verified by noting the current consumption when the heater is turned on. What methods are used to remove rain from a windshield? Wiping off, blowing off, and a chemical rain repellent. What powers windshield wiper systems? Electrical and/or hydraulic power. What are the two inherent problems associated with windshield wipers when operated in flight? Aerodynamic forces reduce blade pressure, and failure to achieve fast enough wiper oscillations. How does a pneumatic rain removal system work? The air blast forms a barrier that prevents raindrops from striking the windshield surface. Why is a windshield rain repellent system not operated when the windshield is dry? Heavy undiluted repellent will restrict window visibility. What is the purpose of the electronic timer in a pneumatic de-icer boot system? It controls the operating sequence and time intervals. Fire protection systems. Where are carbon monoxide detectors usually used? In aircraft cabins and cockpits. What is the indication of excess carbon monoxide fumes when using a CO tester? The tester's yellow silica gel changes color to green, or the tan tablet changes to a shade of dark gray or black. How does a photoelectric smoke detector warn of possible fire? Smoke in the air will cause the photoelectric cell to conduct an electric current. How may a photoelectric smoke detector be checked? By the use of a switch in the test circuit. Name two types of smoke detection instruments used in aircraft. Light refraction and ionization. What does a thermal switch fire detection system consist of? Heat-sensitive units that complete electrical circuits at certain temperatures. How are thermal switches units wired? Parallel with each other and in series with the light. How are fin wall spot detectors wired? Parallel between two complete loops of wiring. How is a thermocouple fire warning system different from a thermal switch system? A thermal switch system works at a specific temperature, whereas the thermocouple system depends on a rate of temperature rise. What does a continuous loop detection system consist of? One or more wires embedded in a special ceramic core that changes its resistance with a change in temperature. What is a continuous element fire detection system? A stainless steel tube containing a discrete element which will produce gas when heated and a mechanical switch to activate the system. What are two types of fire extinguishing systems? A high rate of discharge and a conventional system. What is the most common fire extinguishing agent associated with a conventional system? Carbon dioxide, CO2. What type extinguishing agent is usually found in a high rate of discharge system? Halogenated hydrocarbon type elements, halons. What procedure is used to check fire container for pressure? A chart must be used for determining minimum and maximum gauge readings based on temperature. What protection is provided for a fire bottle in case of a temperature rise in excess of set limits? A safety disc will rupture and dump the agent overboard. What is the purpose of the yellow disc in a fire extinguisher system? It indicates a normal system discharge. What indications may be caused by kinks and sharp bends in sensing elements of a fire detection system? False fire warnings caused by a short. How is a fire bottle discharged? Electrically, by a discharge cartridge. How is the service life of a discharge cartridge calculated? From the manufacturer's date stamp on the face of the cartridge. This concludes the study material to be used for the FAA Airframe oral exam. Good luck.